Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are going to fundamentally shift how we understand dissociative identity disorder, or DID. We're taking the invisible mechanics of the mind and, well, making them vividly visual. Our goal? To explore exactly why people living with DID face such profound and, honestly, often totally misunderstood challenges in their daily lives. We're moving way past the stereotypes today to look directly at the structural architecture of a hidden mind. And let me tell you, it is absolutely fascinating.
To kick things off, I want you to ask yourself a question. What if your memory wasn't a continuous movie where one scene just naturally flows into the next? What if, instead, it was a collection of isolated, untouchable bubbles? Just imagine losing your continuous timeline for a second. Every time you wake up or shift states, pop, a bubble bursts, and you're completely sealed off from whatever happened just an hour prior. You have no index, no context, and no connection at all to the actions or conversations you literally just had. You're dropped into a life without the data to explain how you even got there. Wild, right?
Okay, let's dive into this, because this is where the daily struggles really begin. Most of the world runs on what we can call a single mind operating system. You've got a continuous timeline, shared files, everything's integrated. But DID, it creates a multi-mind operating system. Think of your physical brain as the shared hardware, but it's partitioned. It runs completely separate, isolated software. These are the different identity states, or alters. It's like each operating system has its own isolated hard drive, and those files or memories, they cannot be opened without specific shared permissions. Now, this hardware partition creates a reality governed by what's called structural amnesia. And look, this isn't just being forgetful, okay? It's not like losing your keys on a busy morning. Structural amnesia is the fundamental inability to perceive the continuous, linear mechanics of the physical world. Because of those impenetrable amnesic barriers between identity states, you're structurally locked out from observing basic physical cause and effect. Let's look at a really practical example from our source material involving basic home maintenance. The source notes, processes in my mind were not absolute things. That made the world really not make sense, because it seemed like anything was possible. Think about something simple, like a furnace filter gathering dirt. Because the mind experiences time in those isolated bubbles we just talked about, the slow, predictable progression of dirt filling a filter over time simply doesn't compute. Maintenance becomes this disconnected, abstract rule you blindly follow just to prevent a bad outcome rather than a logical reaction to a physical reality. When you can't track processes, the basic laws of physics feel, well, entirely random. So, what does this all mean? What actually happens when a multi-mind system tries to manage a single daily life? How do you hold down a job or run a household when the very systems inside your head, designed for memory and continuity, are fundamentally partitioned? The answer is that executive function, the brain's ability to plan, organize, and execute tasks, starts to break down in ways that outsiders totally, completely misunderstand. And this brilliantly illustrates what that breakdown looks like in practice. It's the restaurant with no manager analogy. So imagine the brain is a busy restaurant. The front employee, representing the alter currently in control, takes a customer's order for chicken nuggets. Sounds simple enough, right? But there is a massive amnesia wall blocking internal communication. The ticket literally never reaches the kitchen. So the kitchen staff, completely isolated and totally unaware of the new plan, just blindly continues doing things the way they always have. And they cook cheeseburgers instead. To the outside world, this failure looks like standard procrastination, incompetence, or just being flaky. But this is the illusion of intact executive function. The restaurant looks open and fully functioning, but the internal communication center is entirely severed. The front employee made a really solid plan, but they have absolutely no pathway to pass that plan back to the alter, who wakes up tomorrow to actually execute it. Which naturally leads us to a massive point of friction in the lives of those with DID. Why does this structural disconnect so often look like intentional self-sabotage to outsiders? Seriously, when a patient's story changes, or they fail to follow a treatment plan, medical providers and loved ones so often interpret the behavior as lying or manipulation or willful noncompliance. Why is their survival tactic so wildly misinterpreted? Section 1. The Rubik's Cube and Uncoordinated Survival. Let's move to and see how this builds using a really great analogy, the physical mechanics of a Rubik's Cube. Here's how it goes. Step 1, an alter takes control of the body. Step 2, they frantically try to fix their reality and organize their daily life by lining up their specific color on their side of the cube. But here's the catch in step 3. Because of the severe amnesia walls, they are entirely blind to the other 5 faces of the cube.
which leads to step 4. By successfully solving their single side, they inadvertently, blindly, scramble the progress made by the other alters on the other sides.
Let's look at the double action chaos this creates in daily life. Imagine one identity successfully pays a bill. Boom, they solved their side of the cube. But then another identity, who lacks any memory of that payment, calls the company begging for a deadline extension. Or, picture 3 different parts calling the exact same doctor's office with slightly different questions. The medical staff gets furious, and the patient is completely confused as to why. Each part is just trying to create order, completely unaware of the disorientation it's causing across that internal barrier.
This quote from the sources really captures the profound isolation and heartbreak of this reality. They say, half the time, we end up doing something that undoes what a different one of us does. From the outside, people think that we sabotaged it. It is absolutely vital to understand that this is an act of blind survival. It is uncoordinated, it's unintentional, and honestly, it's tragic. It's not malicious intent, and it is certainly not a lack of effort.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the standard medical system often completely misinterprets this dynamic. Therapies routinely view shifting alters as a software issue, right? Like an emotional outburst or emotional dysregulation that just needs a behavioral patch or, some deep breathing exercises. But the neurological reality is that this is a hardware partition. Structural dissociation means the brain's actual physical hardware was divided to survive unthinkable childhood trauma.
And this fundamental misunderstanding leads to what the sources call the dysregulation trap. If you try to run single-mind therapy tools on a multi-mind system, it doesn't just fail, it causes a total crash. Take daily diary cards, for example. These are tools that require a continuous memory to track moods or habits. For a system with amnesic barriers, the alter fronting on Tuesday might have zero knowledge that Monday's alter even started the card. Expecting continuity from a partition system ends up punishing the patient for a neurological barrier they literally cannot control. If you or someone you know ever finds themselves facing this therapeutic mismatch, the sources offer a really powerful way to reframe the discussion. Stop focusing on my feelings or my behavior. This is about how my brain is wired. That exact phrasing empowers the patient to bridge the enormous gap in understanding. It shifts the conversation away from behavioral psychology and anchors it firmly in structural neurology. It forces the realization that, hey, maybe the therapy tools are failing the system, not the patient failing the therapy.
So, the crucial point is that we absolutely must reframe the chaos. When you understand the multiple operating systems, the isolated bubbles of time, and those amnesic walls, you clearly see that this is not self-sabotage or intentional inconsistency. It's uncoordinated survival. Managing a single daily life while navigating a scrambled internal Rubik's Cube requires an incredible, almost unfathomable level of resilience, intelligence, and external scaffolding just to make it through the day. Which leaves us with a final, provocative thought to consider. If the standard therapeutic playbook was built for a completely different operating system, and forcing it onto a multi-mind system causes real harm and systemic gaslighting, well, who is responsible for fixing it? Does the patient have to pretend to be a single, unbroken mind just to get help? Or is it finally time for the medical system to build tools that actually match the architecture of a hidden mind? Think about that for a bit, and we'll see you in the next explainer.